there was a lot of people went to church and they were really born again, and the faith was very real to them. As the time went on, the children didn't follow in the family, and they sort of became churchgoers without real faith. And the main thing I learned was the things I hadn't to do.
Yes.
You don't do this and you don't do that, and didn't leave anything interesting to do.
No, that's it,
so
exactly.
I wasn't quite sure what I wanted in my life like that. So I made sure I wanted to get born again, but I thought not yet. My dad was very strict, and apart from it was wrong in church, there was a lot of us. We just were told not to do it.
Yeah, so it's very miserable, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you're going to church as if you're going to the dentist, and then when you leave church, you look as though you've been, you know, because it's all miserable and depressing. And
But the one thing that I learned, whatever, all the times I heard the gospel, and I was sort of nearly persuaded, but I didn't. And then there came a time when I, postnatal depression, was very miserable, and I'd have given anything to have had the opportunities.
Yes.
But I'd missed them. And I thought, this is it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes.
In the 30s, it was, and I mean, there's people in my church now that say, oh yeah, my mother was very religious. I wasn't allowed to do my knitting on a Sunday.
Well, that's right.
I automatically took my children to church, and they enjoyed it. They met their friends, and the life was much freer, even though they didn't really weren't challenged to get born again. They didn't really have a real faith, but they were brought up with the principles. For example, when Caroline went to university, the friend she was with had been taking drugs. Well, Caroline was horrified. She wouldn't do anything like that, because you never did it when, you know, they learned not to do things even though they hadn't got a living faith. Well, Caroline did. She was very into Christian things when she was younger. I was having a bad time with my depression and all the rest of it. And it became gradually that I suddenly realised I hadn't left it too late. With God, if you come to Him in sincere repentance, He accepts you, whatever you've done. But once, there was one thing that I was reading a book, and there's one thing that really, if you want to be totally obedient, get water baptised. And in the Methodist Church, they never heard of it. And I went to West Street.
Oh, yes, in Crewe,
And I said to Ken, I'm going to get baptised. He says, what do you mean?
Right. Yeah, well.
He was a Christian, but, you know. It really was a turning point when I got baptised.
Right, yeah.
Things started happening. When you see some of the troubles that people have, you just think, if only they had a relationship with God, it would help the troubles. Well, there's a verse in the Bible always in John 3, if you pray anything according to God's will, you know that He hears you. And if you know He hears you, you have the things you've asked for. Say, okay, God, I'm here. In practical things, if you just know God's with you. I was driving on the motorway when my dad was in Blackpool. I was going there, and there was the most horrendous storm, and I was scared, and I pulled onto the side and I just prayed, and all of a sudden I stopped being scared.
Yes.
And another thing, when God really touched me. I was having trouble forgiving somebody,
Yes.
and I just more or less muttered, "Oh yeah, I forgive her," and as if God was saying, "You've got to do something. You can't just say it."
Right. Yes.
So I went and did what I felt I should, and all of a sudden I was filled with such a peace.
Yes.
It gave me, it just changed me.
Yes.
What it did for her.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Even that, just going for an injection and anything, I used to be scared of needles.
Yes.
And I just said, "Oh Lord, please forgive my fear." And I could go, and I was having quite a big injection, and just sat there, and no fear.
Yeah.
And the doctor's quite impressed.